Flight attendant denied black twins first class. Their dad landed his private jet outside. I'm sorry, but your children cannot be seated in first class. These seats are reserved for our premium customers. My children have valid first-class tickets, purchased by me, Dr. Robert Freeman. I suggest you check your passenger manifest again. The bustling airport terminal fell silent as passengers turned to witness the confrontation. Standing tall in his tailored Navy suit, Dr. Robert Freeman placed a protective hand on each of his 16-year-old twins' shoulders. Zoe and Zachary Freeman, dressed in casual but neat attire, clutched their boarding passes with uncertain expressions. Across from them, flight attendant Diane Winters maintained a rigid posture, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes darted between the boarding passes and the African-American family standing before her. These tickets may have been purchased, Dr. Freeman, but there seems to be a discrepancy. I'll need to speak with my supervisor. Diane's voice carried a practiced politeness that did little to mask her disdain. By all means, Robert replied, his deep voice remaining measured despite the anger building inside him. We'll wait right here while you sort this out. But I should warn you, my patience has limits, and my influence extends far beyond what you might imagine. Around them, other first-class passengers were already being welcomed aboard, offered champagne and hot towels. Several cast curious glances at the Freeman family, some with sympathy, others with the same suspicion Diane had displayed. Robert checked his watch, a vintage Rolex his father had given him when he graduated medical school. His mind raced with calculations. The meeting in Chicago was in 5 hours. His entire career hinged on being there on time. Dad, Zoe whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Maybe we should just sit in economy. It's not worth the trouble. Before Robert could answer, Diane returned with a middle-aged man in a pilot's uniform adorned with captain's stripes. Dr. Freeman, I'm Captain Richards. I understand there's an issue with your family's seating arrangement. The issue, Captain, is that your flight attendant seems to have trouble believing that my children and I belong in first class, despite our valid tickets. I'm beginning to wonder if there's another reason for her reluctance. The captain's eyes narrowed as he studied the situation. The implications in Robert's statement hung heavily in the air. Sir, I assure you, Northwest Airlines does not discriminate against any passengers. If you're suggesting, I'm not suggesting anything, Captain. I'm stating facts. My children and I have been standing here for 15 minutes while other passengers board without issue. Now we have a flight to catch, and I have alternatives if this situation isn't resolved immediately. The captain straightened his uniform. Alternatives? Robert's phone rang. He answered it without breaking eye contact with the captain. Yes, James, is the jet fueled? Good, stand by. He pocketed the phone and smiled. My pilot, he's waiting for my call. Now, shall we board as ticketed, or should I make other arrangements? But let's go back to how this all started. It was just 3 hours earlier when the day began like any other for the Freeman family. Robert Freeman awakened at 5:30 a.m., as he had every weekday for the past 20 years. The early morning September sunlight was just beginning to filter through the curtains of his Westchester County home. The smell of coffee already wafted up from the kitchen. Maria, their housekeeper of 15 years, always made sure it was brewing before the family rose. Robert showered quickly, the routine of a surgeon ingrained in his movements, efficient, thorough, purposeful. As he dressed, he paused to look at the family photo on his dresser, himself, his late wife Elaine, and the twins when they were just 7 years old. Elaine's smile still had the power to stop his breath, even 6 years after cancer had taken her. I'm making this right, Elaine, he whispered to the photograph. Today changes everything. Downstairs, the twins were already at the kitchen table. Zachary was hunched over a physics textbook, his wire-rimmed glasses sliding down his nose, while Zoe scrolled through her tablet, reviewing notes for a history presentation. Good morning, Dad, they said almost in unison, a twin habit that still made Robert smile. Morning, kids, ready for the big day? Robert asked, accepting a cup of coffee from Maria with a grateful nod. Ready as I'll ever be, Zachary said, closing his book. Though I still don't understand why we need to miss school for this. Couldn't your meeting wait until the weekend? Robert sat down at the table, taking a moment before answering. Some opportunities don't wait, son. This meeting with the Chicago Medical Research Foundation could secure funding for my spinal regeneration project for the next decade. And I want you both there because this project isn't just about me, it's about our family legacy. Zoe looked up from her tablet. Mom's accident, Robert nodded. The car crash that had left Elaine with a damaged spine had been the catalyst for his research. Though it hadn't caused her cancer years later, Robert had always felt that the years of pain medication had weakened her system. It was a connection no medical journal would validate, but in his heart he knew. If we can help even one person avoid the pain your mother endured, her suffering will have meant something, Robert said. Besides, I've arranged for us to catch the Cubs game tomorrow. Call it an educational experience in American culture. The twins laughed, the tension broken. They finished breakfast as Robert reviewed his presentation notes one last time. Remember, first class on the 10 a.m. to Chicago, then a car will pick us up at O'Hare. We've got a 3-hour window before the meeting, Robert reminded them as they cleared the table. First class, fancy, Zoe teased. Dr. Big Shot, Robert smiled. It's a treat, we don't do this often. Only when Mom's patents pay out, Zachary said quietly. The room fell silent. Elaine had been a chemical engineer, brilliant and innovative. Her patents on biodegradable plastics had been moderately successful during her lifetime, but in the years since her passing, environmental concerns had pushed them into high demand. The latest licensing deal had come through just last month, a substantial sum that had prompted Robert to upgrade their usual travel arrangements. She'd be proud of how you're handling the money, Dad, Zoe said, squeezing her father's hand. I hope so, Robert replied. Now go finish packing. Car will be here in 30 minutes. As the twins headed upstairs, Robert's phone rang. The caller ID showed James Whittaker, his old college roommate and now personal pilot for those rare occasions when Robert needed to travel on his own terms. James, good morning. Morning, Doc, just checking in. You still taking commercial today? That's the plan, keep it simple, fly under the radar, James chuckled. The Freeman Group owns a Gulfstream G650 and you're flying coach, only you, Rob. First class, actually, Robert corrected with a small smile. And nobody needs to know about the Freeman Group today. I'm just a doctor with his kids heading to a meeting. Your secret's safe with me, but the jet's ready if you need it. I'll be at the airfield all day running checks on the new avionics system. Thanks, James, I'll keep that in mind. Robert hung up, his thoughts drifting to the complexity of his life. Very few people knew that the unassuming Dr. Robert Freeman, respected neurosurgeon, was also the founder and majority shareholder of the Freeman Group, a private investment firm specializing in medical technology. He'd started it with his inheritance and built it alongside his medical career, keeping the two worlds separate. His colleagues saw him as a dedicated physician. Only a handful knew he was also a very wealthy man. The decision to keep his wealth private wasn't just about modesty. Growing up as one of the few black kids in an affluent neighborhood in the 1970s had taught Robert that being both black and rich made people uncomfortable. They could accept one or the other, but the combination challenged too many preconceptions. So he'd learned to navigate the world as just Dr. Freeman, letting his medical credentials speak for him. The twins knew about the family's wealth, of course, but Robert had raised them to value education and character over money. They attended public school, lived in a comfortable but not ostentatious home, and were expected to work hard for what they wanted. The sound of the twins coming back downstairs pulled Robert from his thoughts. Car's here, Dad, Zachary called. They loaded their overnight bags into the waiting town car, and the driver, Manuel, greeted them warmly. Good morning, Dr. Freeman, Miss Zoe, Mr. Zachary. Airport, yes. Yes, Manuel, thank you, Robert confirmed. Terminal 4, Northwest Airlines. As they drove, Robert noticed Zoe looking anxious. What's on your mind, Zoe? She hesitated. It's stupid. If it's bothering you, it's not stupid. It's just, I had this weird dream last night. We were at an airport, but they wouldn't let us on the plane. They kept saying we didn't belong. Robert felt a chill, but kept his voice steady. Just a dream, sweetheart. We have our tickets, everything's in order, nothing to worry about. Zachary, always the practical one, pulled out his phone. I've got the boarding passes right here, downloaded last night. We're good to go. The rest of the drive passed with casual conversation. The twins discussed their school projects while Robert made a few work calls, confirming that his assistant had everything covered during his absence. At the airport, Manuel helped them with their bags before driving off with a wave. Freeman family joined the stream of travelers entering the terminal, the familiar controlled chaos of a major airport enveloping them. Northwest Airlines first-class check-in is over there, Robert pointed, leading his children through the crowd. The first-class line was short, and they were quickly greeted by a smiling check-in agent named Teresa, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. Good morning, where are you folks headed today? Chicago, Robert answered, handing over their IDs. The 10 a.m. flight. Wonderful, Teresa typed quickly, then looked up with a slight frown. Dr. Freeman, I'm only seeing one first-class ticket here. The other two are economy. Robert's brow furrowed. That's not possible. I purchased 3 first-class tickets. I have the confirmation email. He pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly to find the email which he showed to Teresa. You're absolutely right, Dr. Freeman. Let me fix this for you right away. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Sometimes our system has these hiccups. I do apologize for the confusion. No problem at all. Thank you for resolving it so quickly. Teresa smiled warmly. It's my pleasure. Now your bags will be checked through to Chicago and you're all set for first-class boarding, which begins at 9:30 at gate 22. Enjoy your flight. As they walked away with their boarding passes, Zachary nudged his sister. See, nothing to worry about, just a computer glitch. Zoe nodded, but her expression remained troubled. Yeah, I guess. The security line moved efficiently, and soon they were in the terminal with 40 minutes to spare before boarding. I'm going to grab some magazines for the flight, Robert said. You two want anything? I'm good, Zachary replied, already absorbed in a book he'd pulled from his backpack. Maybe a bottle of water, Zoe asked. You got it. Meet you at the gate in 15 minutes. As Robert walked toward the newsstand, he couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Teresa had fixed the ticket issue without hesitation, but it bothered him that it had happened at all. He'd made the reservation himself, carefully selecting 3 first-class seats. Computer glitch or not, he'd experienced too many errors in his lifetime to be completely comfortable. At the newsstand, Robert selected a few magazines, Scientific American for himself, National Geographic for Zachary, and Time for Zoe. As he waited to pay, his phone rang again. Dr. Freeman, this is Dr. Patel from the Chicago Medical Research Foundation. Dr. Patel, good morning. I'm looking forward to our meeting this afternoon. That's why I'm calling, Dr. Freeman. There's been a small change of plans. The board chairman, Mr. Whitfield, will be joining us. He's flying in specifically to meet you. Robert's heart raced. Stanley Whitfield was a legend in medical philanthropy, known for his shrewd judgment and generous funding of groundbreaking research. His presence could only mean one thing: they were seriously considering Robert's proposal. That's excellent news, Dr. Patel. I'm honored. Mr. Whitfield has read your preliminary findings and is very interested in your approach. But I should warn you, he asks challenging questions. I welcome them. I believe in this research, and I'm prepared to defend it. Good. I'll see you at 2 o'clock then. Safe travels. Robert hung up, a mix of excitement and nervousness flooding through him. The stakes had just gotten higher. This wasn't just about funding now. It was about impressing one of the most influential figures in medical research. He paid for the magazines and water, then headed back toward the gate, his mind racing with all the points he needed to emphasize in his presentation. When he arrived at gate 22, the twins were already in the pre-boarding area, talking with an elderly couple seated nearby. Robert recognized the easy way his children engaged with people of all ages, a quality they'd inherited from their mother. Dad, Zachary waved him over. This is Mr. and Mrs. Jankowski. They're flying to Chicago to see their new granddaughter. Congratulations, Robert said with a genuine smile, shaking their hands. First grandchild. Fourth, Mr. Jankowski corrected proudly, but the first girl after 3 boys. Our daughter says she's already got her daddy wrapped around her finger and she's only 2 weeks old. Mrs. Jankowski patted her husband's arm affectionately. Just like our Sophia had you wrapped around hers. Must be something about fathers and daughters. Robert glanced at Zoe and nodded. I can certainly relate to that. The conversation continued pleasantly until the gate agent announced the start of boarding. First class and premium passengers may now board through the priority lane. Robert gathered their carry-ons. That's us. It was nice meeting you both. You as well, Mrs. Jankowski replied. Perhaps we'll see you in Chicago. The Freeman family joined the first-class line, where a new gate agent was checking boarding passes. As they approached, Robert noticed the woman's smile falter slightly when she looked up at them. Boarding passes, please, she said, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been with the previous passengers. Robert handed over the 3 passes, which the agent scrutinized longer than seemed necessary. Is there a problem? Robert asked. No problem, she replied, though her expression suggested otherwise. She reluctantly scanned their passes and returned them. Enjoy your flight. As they walked down the jetway, Zoe whispered, Dad, did you see how she looked at us? I saw, Robert replied quietly. Just keep walking head high. At the aircraft door, they were greeted by flight attendant Diane Winters, whose practiced smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she checked their boarding passes once more. Seats 2A, 2B, and 2C are just to your right, she directed them, before immediately turning to greet the passenger behind them with noticeably more warmth. The Freeman family found their seats in the spacious first-class cabin. Robert took the aisle seat, with Zachary in the middle and Zoe by the window. "This is nice," Zachary commented, running his hand over the leather armrest. "Way more legroom than usual. Is this how you always fly when you travel for work, Dad?" Zoe asked. "Sometimes," Robert answered honestly. "It depends on the circumstances." Other first-class passengers continued boarding, many of them business travelers in suits or affluent-looking couples. Robert noticed a few subtle double takes as people registered the presence of the Freeman family, but no one said anything directly. Diane moved through the cabin, offering pre-flight beverages to the passengers: champagne, orange juice, or water. When she reached their row, she addressed only Robert. "Something to drink before takeoff, sir?" "Water for all three of us, please," Robert replied. Diane nodded curtly and moved to the galley, returning moments later with 3 water glasses, which she placed on their trays without a word. "Thank you," Zoe said, but Diane had already turned away. The boarding continued until the first-class cabin was nearly full. Robert noticed that the seat beside Mrs. Jankowski, who had been assigned to first class, remained empty. He saw Diane speaking to her in hushed tones. Robert couldn't hear what was said, but he observed Mrs. Jankowski's confused expression as she gathered her belongings and stood up. Diane escorted her toward the exit, presumably to meet her husband in economy class. "Dad," Zachary whispered, "I think that lady just got bumped from first class." Before Robert could respond, another flight attendant approached their row. "Excuse me, are you Dr. Freeman?" "Yes, I am." "There seems to be a mix-up with your children's tickets." "They were originally booked in economy. We need them to move to their assigned seats." Robert felt his jaw tight. "There's no mix-up. I purchased 3 first-class tickets, which was confirmed at check-in. My children are sitting exactly where their boarding passes indicate." The flight attendant looked uncomfortable. "Let me check with the lead attendant." As she walked away, Zoe gripped her father's arm. "Dad, it's happening just like in my dream." "It's going to be fine," Robert assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "Just a misunderstanding." Moments later, Diane Winters approached, her expression stern. "I'm sorry, but your children cannot be seated in first class. These seats are reserved for our premium customers." "My children have valid first-class tickets purchased by me, Dr. Robert Freeman. I suggest you check your passenger manifest again." And so we return to where our story began, with Robert Freeman standing his ground in the first-class cabin of Northwest Airlines Flight 372 to Chicago, his children beside him, facing the skeptical gaze of flight attendant Diane Winters and Captain Richards. Zachary called out, his earlier discomfort forgotten in the face of luxury technology. "Just don't spend the whole trip watching it," Robert replied with a smile. "We've got places to be." They had an hour before they needed to leave for the meeting, giving them time to freshen up and change. Robert laid out his presentation materials on the suite's desk, reviewing his key points one last time. The spinal regeneration project had been his focus for the past 5 years, a revolutionary approach combining stem cell therapy with a bioelectronic framework that could potentially restore function to damaged spinal cords. The early results in animal trials had been promising, but human trials would require significant funding, the kind only organizations like the Chicago Medical Research Foundation could provide. As he changed into a fresh shirt, Robert's thoughts returned to the incident on the plane. Walter Harrington's words echoed in his mind. Silence never changed anything. Yet part of him worried that making waves now could jeopardize the funding for his research that could help thousands of people with spinal injuries. "Dad," Zoe stood in the doorway, now dressed in a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. "Are you okay?" Robert adjusted his tie. "Just thinking about the meeting." "No, you're not," she said with the directness she'd inherited from her mother. "You're thinking about what happened on the plane." Robert sighed. "You always could read me like a book. Mom could too. She said your eyes get all distant when you're wrestling with something important." Robert smiled sadly. She was right about that. He sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside him. Zoe joined him. "I'm just trying to figure out the right thing to do." "About the flight attendant, report her obviously." "It's not that simple, Zoe. The Foundation meeting today, it's bigger than just my research. If we can secure this funding, it could help thousands of people with spinal cord injuries, people like your mom who suffered for years. But what does that have to do with reporting that flight attendant? Making waves, drawing attention to ourselves, it could complicate things. Some of these Foundation board members are traditional. They might not like a researcher who's making headlines for other reasons." Zoe was quiet for a moment. "So you're saying we should just let it go? Pretend it didn't happen?" "Saying there's a time and place for every battle. Mom wouldn't let it go, Zoe said quietly. She'd say that helping one group of people by staying silent about the mistreatment of another isn't really helping at all. The truth of her words hit Robert like a physical blow. Elaine had always been his moral compass, unwavering in her principles. "You're right," he admitted. "She would say exactly that." Zachary appeared in the doorway, adjusting the collar of his button-down shirt. "Are we ready to go?" Robert stood, decision made. "Almost. I need to make a quick call first." He stepped onto the suite's balcony, Walter Harrington's business card in hand. The call was brief but purposeful. When he rejoined his children, there was a new determination in his eyes. "Now we're ready." The Chicago Medical Research Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of a modern building in the city's medical district. The lobby featured sleek marble floors, contemporary art, and a wall of photographs showcasing medical breakthroughs funded by the foundation over its 60-year history. As they checked in at the reception desk, Robert felt a surge of nervous energy. This moment represented years of work, countless late nights in the lab, and a promise he'd made to Elaine as she battled through her recovery from the car accident. "Dr. Freeman?" A woman in her 40s with dark-rimmed glasses approached them. "I'm Andrea Wilson, Dr. Patel's assistant. He's waiting for you in the conference room." "Thank you. These are my children, Zachary and Zoe." Andrea smiled at the twins. "We've set up a comfortable waiting area for them with Wi-Fi and refreshments, or if they're interested, our innovation lab on the floor below has some fascinating demonstrations of the latest medical technologies we're supporting." Zoe's eyes lit up. "That sounds amazing." "I'll take them down after I show you to the conference room, Dr. Freeman." They followed Andrea to a large, glass-walled room where several people were already seated around an oval table. Dr. Amar Patel, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, rose to greet them. "Dr. Freeman, welcome to Chicago." His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "Let me introduce you to the committee." Robert was introduced to the 5 other people in the room, 3 doctors, a financial officer, and the foundation's legal counsel. Noticeably absent was Stanley Whitfield. The chairman Dr. Patel had mentioned would be joining them. After the twins departed with Andrea for the innovation lab, Dr. Patel addressed the elephant in the room. "Mr. Whitfield has been slightly delayed. His flight from New York was rescheduled, but he assures me he'll be here within the hour. In the meantime, perhaps you could walk us through the preliminary aspects of your research?" Robert nodded, opening his laptop to connect to the room's projection system. As he pulled up his presentation, he focused on calming his nerves. This was familiar territory, explaining the science, the methodology, the potential impact. The personal stakes might be high, but the science spoke for itself. He began with an overview of current treatments for spinal cord injuries, their limitations, and the devastating impact on patients' quality of life. As he spoke, he could see the committee members leaning in, engaged by his clear, passionate explanation. "The breakthrough came when we realized we needed to approach the problem from 2 directions simultaneously," Robert explained, showing a detailed slide of his bioelectronic framework. "The stem cell therapy promotes cellular regeneration, while the bioelectronic framework provides the structural support and neural stimulation necessary for functional recovery." The questions that followed were probing but fair, focusing on the science and potential applications. Robert found himself relaxing into the discussion, confident in his research and its promise. After 45 minutes, the door opened, and a tall, distinguished man in his 70s entered, accompanied by a younger assistant carrying several folders. "Stanley, welcome." Dr. Patel stood to greet him. "We were just getting into the details of Dr. Freeman's remarkable approach to spinal regeneration." Stanley Whitfield had the commanding presence of a man accustomed to authority. His silver hair was impeccably styled, his tailored suit spoke of refined taste, and his piercing blue eyes missed nothing as they surveyed the room. "Dr. Freeman," he extended his hand, "your preliminary findings make for fascinating reading. I apologize for my tardiness, the vagaries of commercial air travel, I'm afraid." "No apology necessary, Mr. Whitfield. I understand completely." They retook their seats, and Robert continued his presentation, now even more aware of the stakes. Stanley Whitfield's interest could make or break the project's funding. Whitfield listened intently, occasionally jotting notes in a leather-bound journal. When Robert concluded his formal presentation, Whitfield was the first to speak. "Impressive work, Doctor, truly, but I have concerns about scalability. Your approach seems boutique. How do we make this accessible beyond the elite medical centers?" It was a fair question, one Robert had anticipated. "That's precisely why the Foundation's support is so crucial, Mr. Whitfield. With proper funding, we can streamline the production process for the bioelectronic framework and establish standardized protocols for the stem cell treatments. Our goal is to create a therapy that can be implemented in any hospital with basic surgical capabilities, not just academic medical centers. Whitfield nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. And the cost per patient? Initially high, approximately $150,000 per treatment. But with scale and refinement, we project that cost dropping to under $50,000 within 5 years. Considering the lifetime cost of care for spinal injury patients, plus the immeasurable value of restored function and independence, the economics are compelling. The questions continued for another 30 minutes, drilling deep into the financial projections, intellectual property considerations, and potential regulatory hurdles. Through it all, Robert maintained his composure, answering each query with the confidence of someone who had thoroughly considered every aspect of his project. Finally, Dr. Patel called for a short break. "Let's take 15 minutes, and then we'll reconvene to discuss potential next steps." As the committee members filed out, Stanley Whitfield lingered. "Walk with me, Dr. Freeman. I'd like to continue our conversation privately." They strolled down the corridor to a small balcony overlooking the city. Whitfield produced a silver case from his pocket, extracting a cigar. "Do you mind?" "Not at all." Whitfield lit the cigar, taking a moment to savor it before speaking. "Your research is groundbreaking, Dr. Freeman. But I sense there's more to your interest in this field than professional curiosity." Robert hesitated, then decided on honesty. "My late wife, Elaine, suffered a spinal injury in a car accident 12 years ago. She lived with chronic pain for years afterward. While her cancer was unrelated, I've always wondered if the years of pain medication affected her ability to fight the disease." Whitfield nodded slowly. "Personal motivation often drives the most significant innovations. I lost my sister to polio in 1952, just months before the Salk vaccine became widely available. That's why I established the Foundation's focus on translational research, moving discoveries from the lab to patients as quickly as possible. I wasn't aware of that history. Few are. I don't advertise it." Whitfield tapped ash from his cigar. "But it informs every funding decision I make. I'm not interested in academic exercises or prestige projects. I want results that change lives." "As do I, Mr. Whitfield." "I believe that." Whitfield studied him carefully. "Which brings me to my real question, the Freeman Group, your investment firm. Why keep it separate from your medical career?" Robert stiffened. "How did you—" "I do my homework, doctor. Your firm has quietly become a major player in medical technology investments, yet you present yourself to the world as simply a neurosurgeon." "The two worlds don't always mix well," Robert replied carefully. "My medical colleagues might question my research motivations if they knew about my business interests, and frankly, being both black and wealthy complicates social interactions in ways I prefer to avoid." Whitfield's expression softened slightly. "I can imagine, though times have changed since I started in this business. Not as much as we'd like to think." "Perhaps not." Whitfield extinguished his cigar. "Well, I appreciate your candor, Dr. Freeman. Shall we rejoin the others?" As they walked back, Robert wondered what impact this revelation would have on his funding chances. Had he said too much? Not enough? The committee had reassembled, and the twins had returned from their tour of the innovation lab, now seated in chairs along the wall. Zoe gave Robert an encouraging thumbs-up as he took his seat. Dr. Patel called the meeting to order. "We've had a productive discussion about Dr. Freeman's spinal regeneration project. Before we conclude, does anyone have final questions or comments?" Silence filled the room as committee members exchanged glances. Finally, Stanley Whitfield spoke. "I've heard enough to make a decision if the committee will indulge me." Dr. Patel nodded. "Of course, Mr. Chairman." Whitfield turned to Robert. "Dr. Freeman, your research represents exactly the kind of innovative, patient-centered approach our foundation was established to support. I'm prepared to recommend full funding for your project, with one condition." Robert's heart raced. "And that would be?" "The Freeman Group matches our funding, dollar for dollar, creating a joint venture that accelerates the path to clinical trials. Your business acumen combined with your medical expertise could make this project move twice as fast." The room fell silent. The committee members looked confused by the reference to the Freeman Group, while Robert processed the unexpected proposal. "That's an interesting suggestion, Mr. Whitfield. However, I've kept my business interests separate from my clinical research for specific reasons." "Which I understand," Whitfield nodded. "But consider this, by publicly connecting the two, you create a new model of medical entrepreneurship, one that could inspire a generation of physician scientists to think more boldly about commercializing their innovations. Robert glanced at his children, seeing the pride in their eyes. Zoe gave a subtle nod of encouragement. "I'll need to consider the details carefully," Robert finally said. "But in principle, yes, I think we could structure such an arrangement." Whitfield smiled, clearly pleased. "Excellent. The foundation will provide $20 million over 5 years. I expect the Freeman Group to match that commitment." Murmurs swept through the committee members, who were clearly processing the scale of the funding and the revelation about Robert's dual career. Dr. Patel looked stunned but recovered quickly. "This is unprecedented but exciting. Dr. Freeman, shall we have our respective legal teams draft the necessary agreements?" "Yes," Robert agreed, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. "My legal counsel will reach out tomorrow to begin discussions." The meeting concluded with handshakes all around. As the room emptied, the twins approached their father, beaming with excitement. "Dad, that was amazing," Zachary exclaimed. $20 million. $40 million, actually, Robert corrected, once the Freeman Group's match is included. "So everyone knows now?" Zoe asked. "About your company?" "It seems so." Robert gathered his materials, his mind already racing with the implications. "It'll be an adjustment." Dr. Patel approached them. "Dr. Freeman, a moment before you leave." The twins stepped away, giving the men privacy. "I must admit I was surprised by the revelation about your investment firm," Dr. Patel said frankly. "In all our correspondence, you never mentioned it." "It wasn't relevant to the science," Robert replied. "Perhaps not. But it certainly proved relevant to securing the funding." Dr. Patel smiled. "Stanley doesn't make $40 million commitments lightly. You've impressed him both as a scientist and as a businessman. I'm grateful for the opportunity to move this research forward." "As you should be. Now I understand you're staying through tomorrow. Perhaps you and your children would join me for dinner this evening. I'd love to introduce you to some of our other researchers." "We'd be honored," Robert accepted. "Though we do have tickets to the Cubs game tomorrow afternoon." "Ah, baseball, America's pastime, a perfect way to celebrate your success." They arranged to meet for dinner at 7, and Dr. Patel departed. Robert rejoined his children, feeling a weight lifted from his shoulders. The funding was secured, and with it the promise of helping countless patients with spinal injuries. "So what now?" Zachary asked as they waited for the elevator. "Now we celebrate," Robert replied. "But first I need to make a call." In the privacy of the elevator, Robert called James Whitaker, his pilot. "James, how quickly can you get the jet to Chicago?" "For you, 3 hours. What's up?" "I'll explain later. Just file a flight plan for O'Hare to New York, departing tomorrow evening. And James, make sure it's registered under the Freeman Group this time, not my personal holdings." "Going public, Doc, that's a change." "It's time. Some things are worth standing up for." After ending the call, Robert noticed his children's curious expressions. "We're flying home on our jet tomorrow," he explained. "And I think it's time I showed you both more of what the Freeman Group does. After all, it'll be yours someday." The afternoon was spent in relaxed exploration of downtown Chicago, with the twins marveling at the architecture along Michigan Avenue while Robert made several phone calls to set his new plan in motion. By evening, they had returned to the hotel to change for dinner with Dr. Patel. The restaurant, an upscale steakhouse with views of the Chicago River, was busy but not crowded. Dr. Patel had reserved a private room where several researchers from the foundation were already waiting. The conversation flowed easily, focusing on medical innovations and the promising future of Robert's project. It was nearly 10 when they returned to the hotel, tired but satisfied with the day's outcome. Robert checked his email one last time before turning in, finding several messages from his legal team acknowledging his instructions about the joint venture with the foundation. As he prepared for bed, Robert's phone rang. The caller ID showed Walter Harrington. "Dr. Freeman," Walter's voice sounded energized. "I've spoken with our legal team about the incident on your flight. They're very interested in pursuing this case. Northwest Airlines has a history of similar complaints, and yours could be pivotal." "I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Harrington. I've been thinking about what you said about silence never changing anything. And I've decided not to be silent anymore about any of it." "That's good to hear, Doctor. Our attorney would like to speak with you tomorrow, if possible." "Tomorrow afternoon works. We'll be at Wrigley Field for the Cubs game, but I'm available in the morning." They arranged a meeting time, and Robert hung up, feeling a sense of purpose. The confrontation on the plane, which had seemed like a potential disaster at the time, was now the catalyst for a more significant change in his life. Morning came with clear skies and the promise of a perfect day for baseball. Robert met with the Civil Liberties Coalition's attorney in the hotel lobby, providing a detailed account of the incident on the plane and signing the necessary documentation to file a formal complaint against Northwest Airlines and Diane Winters specifically. "This may attract media attention," the attorney warned. "Are you prepared for that?" "I am," Robert confirmed. "It's time." The Cubs game was everything Robert had hoped it would be, a quintessential American experience for the Twins, complete with hot dogs, the seventh-inning stretch, and a nail-biting ninth inning that ended with a Cubs victory. As they left the stadium, Robert checked his watch. "We need to head to the airport. Our flight home is at 7. "Back to reality," Zoe sighed. "Not quite yet," Robert smiled mysteriously. "I have one more surprise." At O'Hare International Airport, Robert directed their taxi not to the main terminal, but to a separate entrance marked Private Aviation. "Dad, what are we doing?" Zachary asked, confused. "Taking our jet home." "Our what?" The twins exchanged shocked glances as they entered the Private Aviation terminal, where they were greeted by name and escorted through security without waiting in line. "Dr. Freeman, your aircraft is ready," the attendant informed them. "Your pilot has completed all pre-flight checks." They were driven directly to the tarmac, where a sleek Gulfstream G650 waited, the words Freeman Group discreetly painted on its tail. "You've got to be kidding me," Zachary muttered, staring at the plane. "We own this." "The Freeman Group does," Robert confirmed. "I've just never used it for family travel before." James Whittaker stood at the bottom of the boarding stairs, grinning broadly. "Welcome aboard, Freeman family." "First time flying Freeman Air for the kids, eh, Doc?" "First of many, James," Robert replied, shaking his hand. The interior of the jet was luxuriously appointed, with soft leather seats, polished wood tables, and state-of-the-art entertainment systems. The twins explored with wide-eyed wonder as Robert settled into his usual seat. "We'll be taking off in about 15 minutes, James informed them. "Weather's clear all the way to New York, so it should be a smooth flight." As they waited for takeoff clearance, Robert's phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number with a Chicago area code. "Dr. Freeman speaking." "Dr. Freeman, this is Raymond Norris, Vice President of Customer Relations at Northwest Airlines. I'm calling regarding the complaint you filed this morning." "Yes, Mr. Norris. We take these matters very seriously, and I want to personally apologize for your experience. We've reviewed the incident and spoken with several witnesses, including other crew members. The behavior you described is completely unacceptable and does not reflect our company's values." "I appreciate the prompt response, Mr. Norris. May I ask what actions you're taking?" "Ms. Winters has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We're also reviewing our training protocols to ensure this type of incident doesn't happen again. Additionally, we'd like to offer your family complimentary first-class tickets as a gesture of goodwill." "That won't be necessary," Robert replied, looking around the private jet. "But I would like to acknowledge one of your employees who did behave professionally, a flight attendant named Tamika. She showed the kind of respect and courtesy that should be standard." "I'll make note of that, Dr. Freeman. Again, please accept our sincere apologies." After ending the call, Robert shared the news with the twins. "It seems Northwest Airlines is taking this seriously." "Good," Zoe said firmly. "They should." The jet began taxiing to the runway, passing a Northwest Airlines plane that was boarding passengers at a nearby gate. Robert couldn't help but wonder if Diane Winters was on that aircraft, still treating passengers differently based on her preconceptions. As they accelerated down the runway and lifted into the air, Robert felt a sense of liberation, not just from the physical sensation of flight, but from the weight of the compartmentalized life he'd maintained for so long. There was freedom in this new transparency, in no longer hiding aspects of who he was. The flight home was smooth and quick, with James pointing out landmarks as they crossed over Lake Michigan, then Ohio, and finally approached the New York metropolitan area. The twins, still adjusting to the reality of their father's previously concealed wealth, peppered him with questions about the Freeman Group and its investments. "It all started with my grandfather," Robert explained. "He worked as a Pullman porter on the railroads in the 1940s and saved every penny he could. When he retired, he had enough to buy a small apartment building in Harlem. That grew to 2 buildings, then 3. My father expanded into other investments, and by the time I inherited the business, it was a respectable, if modest, investment firm." "But how did it get so big?" Zachary asked. "Two things happened: your mother's innovations in biodegradable plastics, which I invested in heavily, and my early backing of several medical technology startups that revolutionized minimally invasive surgery. Those investments paid off exponentially." So why keep it a secret? Zoe pressed. I live like we're just regular. Robert considered the question carefully. Partly for your sake, I wanted you both to develop a strong work ethic and values that weren't defined by wealth, but partly for my own comfort. The world treats you differently when they know you have money, especially when you're black. It creates assumptions, expectations, sometimes resentment. Like how that flight attendant treated us differently when she thought we didn't belong in first class, Zachary noted. Exactly. But I've realized that hiding isn't the answer. Standing up, being visible, showing that success comes in all colors, that's how things change. It's what your mother would have wanted. The jet began its descent into Westchester County Airport, the familiar landscape coming into view below them. As they taxied to the private aviation terminal, Robert could see Maria waiting beside the family's car, clearly surprised by their mode of arrival. "Welcome home, Dr. Freeman," she called as they descended the stairs. "I didn't expect you until later tonight." "Change of plans, Maria," Robert replied, helping her with their bags, "and possibly a change of many things." The next morning, Robert awoke earlier than usual. He had a full day ahead, a surgery scheduled at 10, followed by a board meeting of the Freeman Group at 2, and a dinner with Walter Harrington to discuss the Northwest Airlines complaint. As he sipped his coffee at the kitchen table, he scanned the news on his tablet. A small headline caught his eye: "Medical researcher secures major funding for spinal regeneration project." The article briefly mentioned the partnership between the Chicago Medical Research Foundation and the Freeman Group, describing it as a groundbreaking collaboration between medical science and private investment. It was just the beginning of the publicity that would follow, Robert knew. Once the details of the Northwest Airlines incident became public, there would be more coverage, more questions, more scrutiny. But for the first time in years, he felt ready to face it all without hiding any part of himself. The twins joined him for breakfast, both unusually quiet as they processed the revelations of the past 2 days. "So what happens now, Dad?" Zachary finally asked. "With the airline thing and your company going public and everything." "Now," Robert replied, "we move forward together. The truth is always simpler than pretending." Zoe smiled. "Mom would be proud." "She would," Robert agreed. "Of both of you, too." Outside, the morning sun illuminated the garden Elaine had designed, the late September flowers still in bloom despite the approaching autumn. Life moved in cycles. Robert reflected death and renewal, concealment and revelation, injustice and redemption. His phone buzzed with a text from Walter Harrington. "Just saw the news about your research funding. Congratulations. See you tonight to discuss next steps on the other matter." Robert typed a quick reply. "Looking forward to it. Time to make some changes." He set down his phone and looked at his children, the future he and Elaine had created together. They were watching him with trust and admiration, ready to follow his lead into this new chapter. "Yes," he said aloud, though they hadn't asked a question. "It's definitely time for some changes." 3 months later, on a crisp winter morning, Robert stood outside the headquarters of the Freeman Group in Midtown Manhattan, preparing to cut the ribbon on the newly named Elaine Freeman Center for Medical Innovation. News cameras captured the moment as Zoe and Zachary stood beside him, along with Stanley Whitfield and Dr. Patel. "This center," Robert addressed the gathered crowd, "represents not just a commitment to advancing medical science, but to creating opportunities for those who have historically been excluded from the highest levels of research and development. The Freeman Fellowship will provide funding and mentorship to minority medical researchers with promising innovations, ensuring that the next generation of medical breakthroughs comes from all communities." As he cut the ribbon, applause erupted from the audience. Among them was Tamika Johnson, formerly a flight attendant, now the newly appointed Director of Community Relations for the Freeman Group's charitable foundation. The Northwest Airlines case had been settled out of court, with the airline agreeing to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all staff and establishing a scholarship fund for minority students pursuing careers in aviation. Diane Winters had been terminated from her position, and the airline's CEO had issued a public apology to the Freeman family. Walter Harrington approached Robert after the ceremony. "You've turned what could have been just another discrimination complaint into something transformative. Well done." "It's just the beginning," Robert replied. "Change happens one decision at a time." Later that evening, as the family gathered in their home, Zachary raised his glass in a toast. "To Mom, who taught us to stand up for what's right. And to Dad," Zoe added, "who showed us how to do it with grace and purpose." Robert smiled, looking at the photograph of Elaine that still held pride of place in their living room. In her eyes, he could still see the determination and principle that had guided his recent decisions. To family, he said simply, our greatest legacy. As they clinked glasses, Robert felt a sense of completion. The journey that had begun on that fateful flight with a discriminatory act and a stand for dignity had led to a new path forward, not just for his family, but potentially for many others who would benefit from their example and their work. Sometimes, he reflected, the most powerful response to prejudice wasn't anger or silence, but success and visibility, showing the world that excellence comes in all colors and from all backgrounds. It was a lesson he hoped his children would carry forward long after he was gone. And somewhere he liked to think Elaine was watching with pride. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.